Welcome, everyone, to our learning session on democracy and voting rights. This is one of our sessions to prepare for Environmental Day at the Capitol, but the information is useful beyond that. And we're delighted this evening to have with us Medina Moore with the Arizona Faith Network, who is going to talk about the importance of voting rights and democracy and go over a bill. And we'll talk about some other bills that are threats to our voting rights. And with that, I will turn it over to Medina and take it away. And thanks so much.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you all for being here, and Sarah also for the invite to come and speak on one of our voting rights legislations that has now passed in committee today in the when the environmental meeting. So it's great to have you all here this evening. My name is Medina Moore. I am with the Arizona Faith Network. I am the faith-rooted organizer. We are gearing up with legislative session. Many bills have been introduced, and just wanted to share a bill tonight that will be really, really impactful to the upcoming elections and as well as voters, and just share the voter impact on what this bill would cause. And then we'll do some time for questions. And if there are any questions that I may not have the answer to, I'm happy to park and lot and share out my email with you all and just get an FAQ going if that would be helpful. Just wanted to share that every first Thursday of the month, our Voting Rights Committee does meet to go over what's happening in Arizona Ledge and what's coming up with voting in Arizona. So would love to just connect with you all and keep our community strong and share the importance of voting within our faith communities. So tonight I do have a Google Doc, as this is pretty lengthy, of just a presentation of a bill about what's happening with the bill, and then just do some potentials. This is what could impact us, and why it's important for us to want to oppose, and then just sharing the harm of this bill today. So I will share my screen, and then you'll see the information on screen. If you're welcome to take notes if you would like. And if you'd like me to share this bill with you via email, I can certainly do that, but I would just need to condense it and put it into more of a package for presentation. But there are several bills that we'll discuss tonight, but HCR 2001 is our main bill that we're going to discuss. So if you have any questions, if you can just use the hand raise, I think that would be helpful. But I'll also just stop in between for any questions or comments. You're also welcome to use the chat. I think, Sandy, if we could just kind of watch out for the chat if anyone has any questions, and feel free to just step in there and let me know we have a question. But I think the hand raise would be great. That way we don't have each other talking over each other, or just making sure each person's question gets addressed. So we'll start with just going over the bill and exactly what it is, and how we can support one another through this bill during this time. So this is going to be the Arizona House Concurrent Resolution. It's 2001, and a short, or HCR 2001. What they're calling this bill is the Arizona Secure Elections Act. It is current and active, and it's dealing with elections, and it's up in committee next week. Sorry, I said pass, but it's up in committee next week. So this is a proposal to change Arizona's constitution, and it's going to be around how elections work. It would limit voting to U.S. citizens. It would require a government-issued ID to vote. It would restrict early voting to end the Friday before Election Day. And it would require voters to request mail ballots each election after showing proof of citizenship. Because this is a constitutional amendment, it would not become law unless Arizona voters approve it on a statewide ballot. If voters reject it, then nothing happens, and we continue to go through the voting process as we have. So what HCR 2001 does is it limits voting to US citizens. Now, we know that US citizens are the ones that can vote in the United States. But what happens here, it would have you specify that only US citizens are eligible to vote and register to vote in Arizona elections. So to prove your citizenship, you would have to show proof of your birth certificate in order to be able to vote. Now we know that with lots of folks, currently live in Arizona, but I was born in California, and I was born in 1983. I do have access to my birth certificate, but it looks like an ancient document. And a lot of times people cannot just go and get a birth certificate in time to be able to make it back to be able to register to vote. That causes lots of impairments for voters. There may be some folks who do not have access to get over to counties, or sometimes counties can be backed up and you can't get these documents, proof of citizenship documents, in a timely manner. For instance, my son has misplaced his birth certificate, and we're even having trouble within Phoenix to just get another copy of that. And he is eligible to vote, so we're trying to get that quickly. But these type of things can cause barriers to voters who aren't able to get the proper documents. It does prohibit foreign financial contributions. So all contributions from foreign persons or foreign corporations to any candidate or ballot measure campaign in Arizona would be banned. And then it requires a government issued ID when you're voting. So voters would be required to present a voter ID that is an acceptable government issued identification when they're casting their ballot. These IDs must be made available free of charge as provided by law. Any of us that have been to the MVD, formerly DMV, we know that getting access to update our IDs can be issues. If you have not had your mailing address updated to reflect on your ID, that can present as a problem. Before the new IDs that have been issued, we're all required to get a real ID now, but before those IDs requirement came, lots of voters have just a simple Arizona ID, and then Arizona IDs have changed over the years. Me and my children, who are all eligible to vote, have different forms of ID that can present it's all it's all IDs, but they look different. We've had issues at airports even with some of them, and that can present issues to voters as they're going to go cast their ballot. So that would require everyone to go update your ID and present your ID to vote. And then it also sets a deadline to early voting. This is one of the biggest harmful impacts of HCR 2001. As early voting, it has to end by 7 p.m. on Friday, and that would be before any general election. And that would also have to be authorized by law. So many people early vote, many people vote by mail. These things, this would impact the early voting, have longer voting lines, and people potentially not being able to cast their vote if they have this deadline set up. And then no ballots after Election Day closes. So this amendment states that no votes shall be cast or accepted after poll closing times of the actual general election day. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory how that can affect us in our voting in person. And then it does guarantee in-person voting on election day. It guarantees that all qualified electors have the right to vote in person on election day at convenient polling locations. But then again, should something happen, as we've done election protection, we've seen that there's been polling place issues. There have been polling places that were supposed to be open till 7 that have been closed at 4 on election day. It can limit voters from being able to cast their vote in person. And when it comes to mail-in ballots, they're only going to be able to be mail-in ballots only by request with proof. So mail-in ballots would only be offered to voters who have provided documentation of citizenship, excuse me, and who affirmatively request a ballot with a specific mailing address prior to each general election. So mail-in voting is authorized by law. This would be the new rule to the mail-in ballots. Okay. And then it submitted to voters on the next general election day. If the legislation passes HCR 2001, the Secretary of State must place the amendment on the ballot for approval by Arizona voters at the next general election. And so we know that the base harms are creating barriers for eligible voters, as well as making voting less accessible to seniors, to rural voters, and to working families. We know that a lot of our rural voters are, especially the ones who can be harmed by this and working families, because we have families who are working until the evenings, and they may have been able to prioritize, may not be able to prioritize their schedule to get out to cast the vote. In our rural communities, as we're doing a lot of efforts to work on strengthening how the voting process is in rural communities. We've had issues in the last elections in regards to that. And then it would also limit some flexibility. And so just changing the Constitution, Arizona Constitution, and creating some barriers around that. So before we move forward, I just want to know if there are any questions or any comments that anyone would like to share. And I'm just going to stop share briefly. And Melanie, I see your hand raised. Thank you. And then Sarah, we'll get you right after Melanie.
So I can see why having all of these details in the Constitution would be kind of a disaster in case we would want to make changes. It would be very difficult. I do have some questions about two of the things that you mentioned. So no ballots will be received after election day closes. Is that not already the case on that one? That they will count them? They're still allowing counting after, or counting of mail-in ballots, right? But they say they have to receive them in the mail on election day currently.
Sorry, can you just repeat what the question is?
I just wondered if that's something new. No ballots after election day closes, you mentioned, but it seems like that's already the case. Except maybe they still accept. I mean, it's not a postmark issue in Arizona. We have to have the ballots arrive there, right?
Yeah, so we do it. Essentially, it's even though ballots must be received by election day, it doesn't mean necessarily that the counting stops at election day.
Right.
And so with this, they're wanting to stop the counting after election day.
Okay. And then another
Right,
thing,
Melanie, just to add a little bit to that,
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever helped with that, but it's called ballot curing, where people's signature maybe isn't exact or whatever. And basically, they're saying they don't want to count any of those. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it. And so the other thing that I saw on your list was a couple of times it said if mail-in voting is authorized by law. So are they requiring mail-in voting to be authorized for each election, or they're requiring one special authorization law? Why did they put that in there? What does that mean?
Sandy, are you familiar with why they changed the wording to required by law in regard to this?
Here is my theory on why they put that in there. They included it so they wouldn't have to allow vote by mail if the legislature made it unlawful. So it's really putting it in there is saying, well, if the legislature made it unlawful, you don't have to do that, right?
So they want to be sure that this constitutional amendment doesn't enable and require mail-in voting.
Right, doesn't codify mail-in voting in the Constitution. Exactly.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Medina. I appreciate your listing of everything that's complicated. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, Sandy, as well. Thank you, Melody. And then Sarah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did, and thank you for taking my question. I see a lot of red flags in this legislation for one thing. But my major question is about it says an acceptable government ID. Who determines what is acceptable and what is not acceptable? I don't see any wording, specific wording in the document about that, or is it just willy-nilly, somebody at the polls decides that your ID is valid or not?
That's a good question. So I had not looked into that. I have been working alongside of um, vote writers because they have a couple of virtual events they're doing around voter IDs. And I think that would be a good one to park and lot and get information on, unless Sandy, you know who would determine who would be necessarily the primary authority that would decide what's legitimate in regard to the voter ID.
Yeah, I think it would have to be identified in law. It's not in the proposed constitutional amendment, but they do say that it has to, acceptable ID has to prove citizenship. So I think
Uh,
you could narrow it to the documents that prove citizenship. It looks like Debbie has a question for you too.
Debbie?
Yeah, I was just wondering about that same provision. Right now at the poll, I work at the polls, and right now the IDs that are acceptable are very specific. Um, but there's allowed a combination if somebody doesn't have, for example, a driver's license and they have a passport, but the passport doesn't have your physical address on it. They allow a combination of, so you can show like a passport or a military ID, something that doesn't have your current address on it, and then like a bill within 3 months or a bank account, or are they not going to allow those extra IDs anymore? It's only going to be government issued that they're going to allow? That's kind of what it sounds like. Just going to be hugely restrictive.
mhm.
Yeah, and I know that there were some issues in the last election that uh, came around government issued IDs. Um, I'm just reading Melanie's comment that in the bill it says government issued identification, acceptable identification as provided by law. Uh, I'm wondering if this is where the real IDs will come into place, or or Sandy, if you have any other ideas about the ID, because they're not being as clear as that when it comes to the acceptable form of ID. Um, but this is kind of still up in the air about what's acceptable for ID and what's not.
Yeah, and most constitutional amendments require additional legislation, to implement. And so I assume if this passed, which we really hope it does not, that the legislature would have to do a bill to provide more of those details. But it seems like it would be pretty restrictive.
Debbie, does that someone answer your question? Okay, great. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay. Give me just one moment and then I'll share my screen again here and we'll just talk about a few more things and then we can take more questions and then I think that'll be it for this bill. Give me just one moment. Okay. So when it comes to constitutionalizing these rules, there are some of these hard to fix problems that we're seeing in regard to this bill. So the policies that would be written they'd be written into the Arizona Constitution and not the regular law. But if the potential impact of this is if problems arise, there are going to be longer lines. There's greater voter confusion, even with the ideas we've seen where we're not clear on what's acceptable form of ID. Any administration issues. Debbie, as you said, you've worked in polling places, is you may see some issues within the polling places with can we take this ballot, can we not? and also ID issues. And then this is just something that cannot easily be adjusted. As even Sandy said, other legislation would have to be written out in order for some of these things to go into place. So fixes to this would also require another statewide vote, and that would also be very time consuming. And so this matters to our election system. We do need flexibility. We have to think about the emergencies that can come up in elections. When Arizona is, well, at least the Maricopa County surrounding areas, we don't see much natural disasters, but when we're in monsoon season, we can tend to see some things that can impact voting. Any polling place closures that can also impact, and then technology failures. A lot of times, voting machines will go down. And so if you're putting all these things that sort of happen on election day into play, as well as what HCR 2001 also wants to add to election day and the frustration around voters and voting can be heavily impactful in Arizona. And we want to encourage our community to vote. We don't want to see more voting barriers that would cause our community to not want to vote. And I'll just say from the millennial perspective, I think we're getting it now because we're seeing quick changes in this world that, especially in our nation, that we did not think would happen so quickly. But I know that a lot of times when there's a lot of barriers around voting, I notice people will say, well, it's not that big of a deal, or I'm not going to vote. I'm hoping that we're just tired enough and really want to see changes, and we'll get out and vote. But again, if you're having issues with getting an updated ID in order to be able to vote, if you're having issues with voting early, mailing in, that can deter a lot of people away from casting their vote. And so we don't want this HDR 2001 to move forward. And we want to alert our communities about this impact that it will cause. And outside of, voting can be a little intense or stressful for some folks. And so we don't want to we don't want to increase confusion or stress in our communities behind this. And then though there are certain communities that will be disproportionately affected by this as well because there are barriers there. Our seniors, we're hoping a lot of times to cast their ballots to vote early, individuals who aren't able to get to the polling locations at certain times. This bill can cause even greater lower voter turnout. And for some folks, actually ban them from voting if they're not able to get things like a birth certificate and get their IDs updated in time. And then we'll also have long lines in getting updated IDs, and that can also deter folks away. So our hope is that this will not go through, and we can keep things as they would be the same. And also just early voting, that not stopping right at 7 the Friday before the elections, but being able to vote and keep things the way that they are. Are there any other questions or comments or just something that you've noticed in the last election, or something that you, even with HCR 2001, that you'd like to discuss or share? And let me just stop share so we can see you, Irene.
Yes, I have a question. What are we doing proactively if we know that it may be a issue with the identification? What are we doing proactively, and as well as what are we doing for our elderly that may not be able to get to the polls? What are we doing now that we can already be prepared for this just in case it happened? I like the whole thing with hoping, but I think we need to be proactive just in case it does go through. And then that way, the ones that are eligible for voting, we can have them with their identification already ready to go. And then also people who may need rides to the polling places in their areas. What can we do ahead of time, even to get volunteers? Because that's what we have to do, organize and work together to try to make sure that those that are eligible to vote. And I think sometimes if we spend too much time talking to people that absolutely are not allowed to vote, we're wasting time. We need to focus on the people that can vote, and it's going to be the elderly that do not have felonies and things, and they are able to vote, and other people that may not have access to vote but can vote.
Sorry,
It's
my
okay.
bar went away, so I couldn't unmute. Absolutely, I agree. Mobilization is one of, the things that we do within AFN, but also events like this. So I would say first for voting ID, it would be very important to, and I'm going to just type it down here in the chat, voteriders.org for those who may have some voter ID questions, issues. Vote Riders helps to get in person or by mail, helps to get your IDs updated. We'll also come out and speak to your communities or speak to your groups in regard to voter IDs in specific, and what's needed as again with HCR 2001, something could change if they write in another bill as to require what the actual required ID is, and so things can shift. So staying on top of the resources that are available through the voter ID. Also, Disability Rights Arizona. Last year, they were driving folks to the polls, supporting our elderly communities who may needed to get to polling locations or need to get out to vote, and then also for early voting. Those are two resources that I'm familiar with off the top of my head, but I think it would be great to also have a resource list as things are changing. So I like that question, Irene, because that would be good to just kind of put together within the different orgs that are doing things. And I think, Sarah, you may also, or sorry, Sandy, Sierra Club, you may also have some resources as what we can do as well to make sure everyone is up to date. And
Will they come out to like the resiliency centers and speak to the people that say there if we contact vote writers?
yes, so I can give you the contact to Vote Riders specifically. They did a virtual with Arizona Faith Network in regard to voter IDs. Uh,
Mhm.
and I'm sorry, I don't want to say yes and speak that Danny will come out, but I think speaking with Danny would be helpful. And I think they'd be more than welcome to come out and educate the community. But I don't want to give a yes and not know
Well,
her schedule or time.
oh,
But I
okay, I can talk to them. And then also we're planning a health fair in April at Wesley UMC Church.
that
And
would
then on Wednesday, they have a large showing at their feeding program on Wednesday at First Church UCC. So there are things that's happening now that people may not know about, but while we have the community members, they're captive audiences. That's when we need to kind of get the information to them.
yeah. Danny was also at a voting fair that I did with the Phoenix Indian Legal Clinic, and they had resources and information to hand out. So I believe they do in-person events. That would be a great person to connect with, and I can also just send you Danny's email, but it should be on Vote Riders as well. That would be a great resource to have around IDs, as I believe the voter ID will probably be a lot of the maybe where they'll try to hang up some voters with, and outside of just having your birth certificates. And that would be just a word of mouth sharing with folks to make sure you have proof of citizenship documents before they go to vote. And that can take some time to get.
Can I just add, I think it's
Thank
important
you.
for people to know that um, this, even if the legislature passes it, it's not these rules are not going to be in effect for the 2026 elections. What would happen is if the legislature passes this bill, it would go on the ballot. So I mean, I think no matter what, always informing people about things and making sure they're ready to vote is, and we can help them vote is important. But I think adding that they'll have an opportunity to actually vote on this in November would be important too.
Thank you for clarifying that, Sandy. That's correct. This is to vote or oppose or Sarah, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy, for that interjection, because that answers one of the questions that I had about the logistics of this. If it were to pass in the legislature, would it be a special election then to make this amendment part of the Arizona Constitution. And I had one other question too. Yeah, does anybody out there, Medina, Sandy, whoever, know what the temperature at the legislature is right now in regards to this piece of legislation? Is there a lot of support for it among the Republicans, or are there a lot of, is it just, do we have some wishy-washy people out there who are not in support of this? I'm just curious if anybody has taken the pulse of the legislature on this.
Go ahead, Sandy.
I think this is one that they really want to put on the ballot. And it's a kind of a retread from last year. They they had it as like a regular bill, and the governor vetoed it. And so now they're putting all of these, restrictions in the bill, plus adding things like you have to be a citizen to vote, which in Arizona you do have to be a citizen to vote. Some states allow non-citizens to vote in local elections, just so, but in Arizona, you do have to be a citizen, but I think they're putting it in there to try and get people to support it. So this is a way to get around the governor and go, directly to the voters and make it sound like, they're protecting voting when they are trying to hinder voting. So I think there probably is a fair amount of support in the Republican caucus for advancing it, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Answers my question.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sandy. And so just as we close out, just wanted to reiterate that HCR 2001, it is not law now, but it is up to us to make sure that that doesn't happen through our vote. It is a proposal, and it would be made part of the Arizona Constitution if it is put on the ballot and if it is agreed to move forward. The Arizona voters, we're the ones who decide whether this takes effect or not. So they can place it on the ballot, but we as the public will make the final decision as would this be best for Arizona or not. It essentially does create voting barriers to voters and to the people within the community that wish to vote, especially regarding early voting and mail-in ballots. And then it does impact election day voting. It would guarantee the right to vote in person election day, but it also changes with the polling location hours and then early voting with cutting off before election day. And I saw here, Melanie, that in regard to ID, you said we already have this rule and people need appropriate ID, which is correct. So we still need to include that as part of prepping people for votes. And that is correct, as we saw some issues with IDs last year in voting during the voting season. And then it also just puts it in the Constitution exactly what the correct ID would be. I think it's very important to discuss this in your community. As far as Arizona Faith Network, with a lot of our different faith spaces, we also discuss it in how it limits access to the ballot and how it also can cause individuals to have low voter turnout when it comes to the elections, but how important it is for us to oppose as Arizona voters in when harmful voting rights bills present themselves as such. And so if we just take the position as community leaders or just word of mouth saying that, have you heard of this bill, and addressing what the harm could be, as there will be folks who will be addressing why it's important for this bill to be passed. And so I think it would be helpful, as Irene, you asked, how do we get information out or word out, or what, as we're sharing within the spaces that we're sharing about the harm of our, as we're at our, our local events, or as we're on virtual events, the harm of HCR 2001. I think that would be very important moving forward, and just ensuring that our community, our family, our friends are ready to vote, and have their IDs in place and know their polling locations and know the polling location times and when they're opening and closing, and just the importance of getting out to vote in this coming election. So thank you all for your time, and I'm going to pass it back over to Sandy if there are no questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Medina. Great info. Really appreciate it. And just all the work that you do on helping people vote and access our democracy. We we always say we can't have a healthy environment without a healthy democracy, and this work is foundational. One thing I did want to add about the ID that I'm not, there's so much in this bill, and I just wanted to make sure people didn't miss, is like right now, I mean, I had to show ID when I registered to vote. And, but I'm on the early voting list. And as long as I keep voting, I keep getting a ballot. And the way they confirm that it's me is with my signature on that envelope. With this, you would have to show ID, proof of citizenship, before you could vote each time early. So that is another way to, because early voting really has increased voter turnout. So it's another way to discourage voter turnout. So I did want to just kind of highlight that for people, because if you're like me and you vote early, it would really, make it less convenient for sure. And then I did want to mention too that there are a number of other bills in the legislature that seek to hinder or make it more difficult to vote. For example, to get rid of voting centers. People can vote early at voting centers. There are efforts to eliminate those. Um, Overall, there seems to be a real, pushback against early voting. And so whatever ways they can, try to erect impediments, they are doing that. So, and we can share and we'll share more of the bill numbers as we get a little bit closer to Environmental Day. They are still introducing, and we're still going through them. But there were several bills that were heard in Senate Judiciary and Elections Committee this week, and they overall are trying to require unreasonable things. Most of the bills were Senator Fincham and Senator Rogers' bills, and they certain specifications for ballots. So only certain vendors or a vendor would actually be able to provide our ballots, specific watermarks on them. Limiting U.S. citizens' ability to vote. For example, there are children of people in the military who are born outside of the United States. They're still U.S. citizens, and they may turn 18 and not have lived in the U.S., but they can still vote, right? Because they're a U.S. citizen. This bill, Senate Bill 1060, would say they cannot vote. It's interesting to me that it's Senator Rogers' bill, because she's very supportive of the military. So apparently that wants to limit who can vote. They want to make more information on who votes available immediately after the election, and our concern, and via the internet, and our concern is that might result in more voter intimidation. So Senate Bill 1038 and 1040. So those are just a few examples of some other bills that we're seeing already this session. And there is a mirror bill to HCR 2001 in the Senate. So they'll probably start moving that. And if they do, then that could, HCR 2001 could be one of the first anti-voter voting bills that goes through this session. So I think I will leave it at that, and see if anyone has any more questions for me, for Medina. It looks like no. So again, thank you so much, Medina. Appreciate you doing this and all the work you're doing and the work that Arizona Faith Network is doing. And uh, we will look forward to seeing many of you at Environmental Day at the Capitol, and hopefully you'll come down to the Capitol other days if you are interested. We have a whole group of people that are willing to, show you around. And I know sometimes going by yourself can feel, well, it can just feel lonely. So just let us know, and we're happy to, connect with you there. But there'll be a whole bunch of people to connect with on Environmental Day on the 11th. And then just for folks in the Phoenix area, wanted to let you know tomorrow from 3 to 5, we have uh, the testimony training and request to speak sign up that we're going to do down at the legislature. Just that's the next of our learning sessions, and the only one that's in person. The rest will be available via Zoom. All right. Well, thanks again. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thanks so much. It was great conversation.